So last time we completed the 19th verse of chapter 3, Karma Yoga, from the Gita. And in the 19th verse, he concludes Tasmat. Tasmat means therefore. After giving from verse 4 onwards the logic and the reason for action. Number one, you cannot be tamasic, lazy and indifferent, because he says even to maintain your body, you need to act, right? He talked about that. And then if you get into action, but it is selfish, desire ridden, based on likes and dislikes, you only create more desires, more vasanas, which is what is happening. Either people are inactive or their actions are fully desire ridden, personalized. So even that is no good because your mind is disturbed. We want peace, so it doesn't work. And in the future, you're setting up yourself up for even more agitation because desire ridden action begets further desires. So this is the cycle which everybody is caught up in. This is nothing but your past actions create your present vasanas, right? The Upanishad say, Yathakari, Yathachari, Tatha Bhavati. As you think, as you act, so you become. So your present desires are a result of your past actions. And unknowingly, you're just perpetuating that process. So as you go through life, it becomes more and more monotonous, more agitating. You may have much more, but you're all the more agitated. How many people have told me, we're doing very well off. They said, when I didn't have anything, I think I was far better off. I was much happier. Why? Why do people talk like that? Because you're just increasing that attachment, that obsession. And soon the body gives way and dies before you know it. And it's the same cycle. So the only way out of this cycle is what he concludes here. He talked about yajna, right? You have to sacrifice this ego and egocentric desires. That is the significance of that ritual of fire worship, where the grain represents your body, your ego, those desires, and they are sacrificed in that fire of knowledge, in that fire of a higher purpose in life. So that's what he says in the 19th verse. Therefore, without attachment, always perform actions which should be done. Because by performing action without attachment alone, you reach the Supreme. So I told you in conclusion last time, and even yesterday we were ironically doing the same portion in the Vedanta treatise, that it is only through action for a higher purpose. See, the intellect sets a higher goal. Any action you do to get to that goal becomes your obligation. So you must first understand the definition of obligation, what ought to be done. It's not what you think. My family, therefore I have obligation. It's a very limited way of looking at it. When you set a higher purpose in life, the action which takes you there becomes obligatory for you. Therefore, without attachment, always perform karyam karma, that which ought to be done. because only through that process do you reach enlightenment. So when you work for a higher purpose, the lower falls off, the lower desires. You keep going higher, the lower keeps falling off. And that's how you move. So beautifully, after giving the logic, the reason, he concludes in the 19th verse, which we completed last time. So before we continue, any clarifications from the previous sessions? Everybody okay so far? So now in the 20th through 24, interesting, I told you the Gita is not only philosophical, it gives you a lot of insight into human psychology. And this is one of those areas. So what has Krishna done so far? He has given the intellectual appeal, right? But you remember, this is a conversation. It's not a one-sided lecture going on. So he looks at Arjuna and sees he's not fully reacted to the intellect, to the intellectual appeal. So if you don't react to an intellectual appeal, you have to supplement it with the emotional appeal. And which is what he does here. So, see, that is what is happening to all of us also. Intellectually, you may understand this is the right path in life, but emotionally, your emotions are still stuck to your desires and attachments. They don't go together. That's the whole problem. So, if you really want to act in a particular direction, your intellect should understand, your mind should cooperate. So, Krishna sees Arjuna's emotions are not cooperating. So, here 20 to 24, he gives emotional appeals for Arjuna to act. And at the end of the 24th verse, thank God for Arjuna and for us. Finally, Arjuna reacts. Yes, now I'm ready to act. So, 25 to 35 is actually the gist of this chapter. The real focus, the technique of right action. So see how scientifically it's done. He gives the emotional, intellectual appeal, then the emotional appeal. So Arjuna is fully ready. And 25 onwards, he gives the technique, how you should be acting in this world. So same thing, psychology in the sense you must always assess. See, I've heard mothers talking to their children pure logic. Don't drink orange juice, It's not good for you. It's high in sugar. Sugar is bad. That fellow 3-year-old looking at that woman, mad, will go drink the juice. You can't talk to an emotional person giving reason. And you do the opposite when they're adults. When they need reason, you give emotion. You used to love orange juice when you were a child. Why you're not drinking now? For my sake, drink no. Mom, what's wrong with you? The 50-year-old, she's 70. Emotional. Right? Praveen, you get the calls, no?
Yes.
Did you have kheer today? Did that wife of yours make horrible woman? It doesn't make anything which she's supposed to. Mom, I don't want kheer. Why? You know how you liked it? One time we had gone to your native place and and poor daughter-in-law in trouble. What you do? I kept my son. Emotion. When the fellow needs reason, he's functioning on reason, and you're giving emotion. So you must always assess who's in what condition. See, when your person is highly emotional, you can't talk reason. You'll get even worse. People have hit and killed each other in fits of emotion, even spouses, literally. Because the you don't understand. When they're emotional, leave them alone. You're giving them reason. They're not ready for that, right? And sometimes one is not enough. They're reacting partially, which happens in this case. Arjuna is partially reacted to reason. But he needs the emotion also to go along. So Krishna gives this. That's why I said it's psychological. It gives you a lot of insight. First chapter, what happened? You all remember, right? I know you've forgotten by now. Long time ago. What happened in the first chapter? When Arjuna was emotional, not only emotional, he had emotion and ego. He thinks he knows what he's doing is right. In that condition, should you talk to a person? And that's when you start fighting. Completely wrong. Person not only is emotional, they believe they know what they're doing. So what did Krishna do? Kept quiet. If you keep quiet, there's a chance the person will go introvert. That person is not real. It's like talking to a wall. If you're talking to a wall, how long you will talk? You'll go introvert. What am I talking? That's what happened to Arjuna in the beginning of chapter 2. I don't know what I'm talking. I'm confused. Then Krishna started speaking. See, this is maturity in life. We all lose out because we are emotional, impulsive in everything. So you want to help somebody assess their state of mind. And that's what is happening here. So I'm giving you the background so you know how beautifully the whole text is written with every aspect considered. So the emotional appeals for action. And emotion is not just one emotion. There are various emotions you have to try and cater to. So he uses a few different emotions: devotion, fear, threat. You go to the threats and fear at the end if the other emotions don't work. Personal appeal. So you'll see. 20.
कर्मणैव हि संसिद्धिम् आस्थिता जनकादयः लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि.
Verily, by action alone, Janakadaya, Janaka and others attain perfection. That's one. Two, he says, even with an eye to the welfare of the world, you should perform action. Loka Sangraham. So, two appeals here. One is devotion. Devotion is that feeling of adulation, respect which you have for past great people who you consider great. So he says, you don't want to act, but remember, this country is full of Raja Rishis, kings like you, kings and princes who found perfection through action. So you should also act like they did. So those days, and even today for Orthodox people, it is a very powerful emotional appeal because you don't want to do something, but people who you look up to, respect, have done it. So that's catering to your devotion, to your sense of tradition. So Janaka was the first king mentioned, not the first, I'm sorry, in the Upanishads. He was the first, but in the Vedas there are many more before him. But he was the first recipient of the ancient teachings of the Upanishads, the conversation between the great sage Yajnavalkya, and he taught Janaka, and who was a Raja Rishi, king sage, who himself became a great uh, soul, enlightened soul through those teachings. Ajata Shatru, Jana Shruti, these are great kings in the Upanishads he's talking about. Before the Gita, much before the Gita were the Upanishads. So he's saying they all learned the knowledge and they didn't leave what they were doing. They lived in the world and acted out those principles. And through that, they gained perfection. In fact, this applies to all of you who are not left everything, but you are still deeply interested. Those of you who are interested in spiritual growth, it should inspire you that there were people able to do this, reach even the ultimate in and through what they were doing in life. So get on to that. That's what the whole Gita is teaching. He's not telling Arjuna to leave. He's saying fight. Do what you ought to do. Through that you will attain perfection. So number one, devotion, tradition. So you can also use that. And fellow is lazy, your son, but he likes basketball. LeBron James works hard. Why can't you? Then he'll start working. I don't know, whatever they look up to, right? Cricket, whoever. Give them examples they relate to. Look how hard they had to work. So it's like that. And second is persuasion. You persuade somebody. This is another emotional appeal. It's emotional because he's saying, with an eye to the welfare of the world, you should perform action. If not for yourself, at least do it for others. That's a powerful appeal. That emotion that, okay, let me at least do it for others. So you try and persuade a person to do it for the sake of others, if not himself. That's another powerful emotional appeal. So two he uses here: devotion, persuasion. 20. Clear? 21.
यद्यदाचरति श्रेष्ठः तत्तदेवेतरो जनः स यत्प्रमाणम् कुरुते लोकस्तदनुवर्तते.
Yadyadacharati Shreshtaha. Shreshtaha, the head, the superior person. Whatsoever the superior person does, tad tadeva itara janaha, that alone others do. Sayat pramanam kurute, whatever standard he sets, lokas tadanu vartate, others follow that. The world follows. So this is the principle of leadership. Please understand, in this world, not only does it apply to the world, country, community, family. A true leader doesn't talk. They set the standard through their life. And by seeing that, others follow. Now, where is that? Where are the leaders? In any field today. Don't see anybody even remotely, genuinely working for the society. It's all self-centered, egocentric, everywhere. I'm not singling out any country, any family. Everywhere it's the same problem. So only when a person who leads sets an example, others will follow. So those of you who want to, who raise kids, right? What is the mistake the parents do everywhere? There's two things. One is you don't set the standard through your life. You yourself lead a selfish, indulgent life. And second is you're constantly lecturing to the children about leading unselfish, disciplined lives. Constant. That's why it has no impact at all. You got to reverse it. You set the example through your life and don't talk about it. That silence is so powerful. You have no idea. So Lincoln said that there is only one way to make a child go in the way you want, and that is to go that way yourself. This is Abraham Lincoln. Although you say this is from Vedanta, this is everywhere. Any wise person. Einstein, setting an example is not the main means of influencing others. It's the only means. Setting an example is not the main means of influencing others. It's the only means. That's why you may be inspired with this, but it has no influence on your spouse. Because they look at your behavior and say, what is this? So your behavior should change for the better. And they should be inspired. How is it you used to get so worked up, angry? Now you don't get that anger. They should see the difference. That has a far bigger impact than you talking about. So, what is the emotional appeal he's using here? Vanity. He's appealing to Arjuna's vanity as a leader. You are a leader. If you don't act, everybody will stop acting. You should act. Only then others will act. So he's appealing to his ego, his vanity, which is another powerful emotional appeal. But incidentally, this verse is so important. It's the foundation of leadership. A CEO comes late to work. How can he tell his employees to be on time when he's late all the time? It's like that. It will not have an impact. So all the seminars and all the workshops they go on giving, work for the company, nobody works because they themselves are selfish. They're all working for themselves. How will it have an impact? You genuinely work for the company, others will follow you. So whatever the superior person does, that alone people do. What pramanam? Pramanam means the standard, the yardstick. He sets or she sets, the masses follow, the world follows. So I see people, even the cricketers and all, they'll make a century. I dedicate this to my wife. Have you ever heard anything so absurd? You dedicate you're playing for your country. Even here they don't do that. I dedicate this to my wife. I dedicate this to my children. And and people look up to these fellows. Actors and sports people. What will the world follow? Everybody dedicates it to their wife, who's sick and tired of being dedicated to. She only says, just leave me alone. You dedicate it to your country, you dedicate it to your teacher, your person who's taught you the sport, the parents who sacrificed so much. Not one fellow says that. My wife, my children. Unbelievable. Level as see in India, top to bottom, their whole life purpose is to blow up whatever wealth they have in the wedding, children's wedding. That's the purpose of their existence. Trust me. Go on accumulating, and all the others follow that. One fellow has 40 dishes. Have you ever heard? I've been to weddings like that. It's nauseating. How can one single human being eat not 40 dishes? 40 dishes means one is a buffets from all parts of the world. One Thai buffet, one Chinese, one Indian, South Indian, North Indian, East Indian, West Indian. uh, and then 50 desserts. There's a dessert tent. Any one human being can eat that much. See the food being wasted completely. And the next wedding, that fellow wants 75. This is the standards. One fellow doesn't say, I'm not doing. All that budget is for charity. The others will follow. Nobody does. And all the papers write this one. This was wearing this from that designer worth that many lakhs of rupees. Lakh means 100,000. Yeah. The papers write that. Standards being set. So you work on yourself and stop talking. Finished. That's it. That is real leadership. You want to influence others, that's how you do it. Shreyas.
Hariom Gautamji. Practical question. Verse 21 is incredibly powerful. No doubt, a superior person who displays the principle of leadership, people gravitate to that individual. How do we rationalize, or I'm just curious, from a practical standpoint, some of us are truly blessed. I'm not saying born into wealth, but born into being around people who display some of those behaviors, and we can follow. But then there are others. It doesn't matter if they're born in penury or in wealth. They're not around those kind of people. So there is a little bit of a luck factor here, isn't it? In terms of hitting like the in vitro lottery, kind of the family you're born into or the environment that you're raised in.
In vitro lottery.
Yes.
The IVF lottery is.
Yes.
First of all, Shreyas, it's nice to hear all the original terms that you're thinking of. But the fact is, as you think, so you become. It's a cause and effect. I've told you, birth. You have deserved that environment because of your past actions, good or bad. Number one. So, you're right. Some people get a conducive environment. Doesn't necessarily have to be wealth, it could be values and culture, which is far more important. But they have deserved it because they have demanded that environment from their past actions. So, even so, there are people who, in spite of their environment, their vasanas are so powerful that they've been able to overcome the effect of the environment. So ultimately, it's your nature and environment and action. There are people born in beautiful environments who've turned out to be criminals. There are people born in criminal environments turned out to be saints. It's all true stories. So, environment only influences the nature you have within. If you have a good environment, the good nature in you will find a conducive atmosphere to grow. That's about it. In fact, as a parent, that's what you have to do, is to create that conducive environment. So the positive nature of your children has a area to grow, and the negative gets suppressed. That's how you influence them. So it's nothing to, there's no such thing as luck or lottery. You take that word out of your dictionary. That's what Swamiji says. Go to the dictionary, tear out luck, chance. It's pure cause and effect. So your desires demand that environment, good or bad.
Thank you.
Yes, Chitra.
Gautamji, I had a question on the previous verse, 20, where Krishna makes an appeal to Arjuna, even if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for others. That seems to be sort of reverse based on the tendencies of most people around us, which is selfish tendencies, where they would rather do it for themselves than others. So if you had to use this persuasion tactic in the real world now, how would one do that? Because most people are really not like Arjuna around.
Yeah, so this applies to Arjuna, right? The emotion works for him because he has those tendencies to serve. So he's appealing to that emotion in him. And even for a selfish person, it's not that they're 100% selfish. Whatever feeling they have, anybody can react to that. Look, you don't want to do this for yourself. The point is, he does not want to do this for himself. He's saying, I don't want the kingdom. I don't want to fight this war. So he's saying, you don't want to fight it for yourself. It's the reverse. Fight it for others. So that's how you assess the situation and see what it would react. If you think a person won't react to that, fellow is so selfish, you'll say, others, who cares about others? I don't want to do it. Then you go to the next appeal, threat. If you don't do it, whatever allowance is there is gone. Then you'll do it. So where's the problem? You see what applies, no? I think somebody else had the same question. I've answered it, they've stopped. Okay. Right? 22.
Name Parthasti Kartavyam Trishu Lokeshu Kinchana Nanavaptamavaptavyam Varta Eva Cha Karmani.
O Partha, there is nothing in these three worlds that has to be done by me, nor anything unattained that has to be attained. Yet I engage in action. So, this emotional appeal is called personal appeal. Personal appeal is you don't want to do it, I am doing it. Why don't you? Why it's emotional is any fellow with the intellect will say, you are doing it, you do it. No, why should I do it? But who has intellect? See, in India, you ask a fellow, Indians typical, would you like to have a cup of tea? No. Have no. Very reticent, by nature. But if the fellow says, I am having, will you have? Of course. What does me having to do with you? But they need that emotional appeal. They won't ask. It's actually positive. They don't want to inconvenience the person. But they say, I am having. Okay, if you are inconveniencing, then definitely I also. So when I came as a student here, I didn't know all this. See, when I was 17, I came to America to study, And since we were international students, all my buddies, friends and all, they used to call me to their home for the breaks, fall break, Thanksgiving. So first time I went, I still remember, fellow's house, lovely house and everything. And we're sitting, and his mom got some nice snacks, crackers and whatever. Would you like? No. No, it's okay, it's fine. Yeah. American. Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine, auntie. I'm not your auntie. First of all, I got to, because we call everybody through respect. I'm not your auntie. I'm not your aunt. Oh, sorry. Whatever. The first time when you had to call them by their name. Like, one fellow, just remember this story, I'm going to another one. There's this guy, he was telling us, he's a physical therapist in the Midwest. So when he first started his practice, he came from India, he started his practice in Chicago, near Chicago. And a really heavy patient came, and he was trying to push that guy, and that fellow was falling on him. So he needed help. So he's calling out to his assistant. There's a lady, sister, come and help me, sister. And she didn't come. So he finally and then he's furious. He came outside and said, "I'm calling out to you. Why did you come and help me? I'm not your sister." Because in India they call the nurse's sister. So you have to know when you come here. She said, "I'm not your sister." So then he learned the hard way. So same thing. So the lady offered me, my friend's mother, "Would you have some cheese, a cracker? Would you have some chips?" No. I said, "No one." She took it away. I was so hungry. Then I learned my lesson. Before they asked, I used to take it. After So India, they will say at least 4-5 times. Then 5th time, will say okay. So you got to learn the tricks of the trade. I'm telling you. So he says, this is a personal appeal. He says, and the beauty of this verse is he gives an insight into who's a realized soul. That's what you got to understand. The personal appeal part I've explained. He says, I don't need to act, I'm acting. Why don't you act? That's personal appeal. But what he's saying here, there is nothing in the 3 worlds that has to be done by me, nor anything unattained that has to be attained. But yet I am acting. So I've told you, who's an enlightened soul is a person who has reached the 4th state of consciousness. The 3 worlds here refers to the 3 states of waking, dream, deep sleep, the conditioned states. So he says, I have attained the self. In other words, and self is the state of infinite bliss. Atyanta Sukham, which he declares later in the Gita. The absolute unending bliss. So when a person enjoys infinite bliss, there's nothing to be done, because why do you act? To find happiness. Why are we acting birth to death, morning to evening? Is to find happiness. Now if you closely analyze, why are you finding happiness? Because right now you're unhappy. If you're fully happy, why would you find happiness? Has anybody even thought of this basic question? But no, right from birth you have desires. It's understood that you're unhappy. That is the default state. So person who's reached that state, he says, there is nothing that has to be done by me. There is nothing which has to be attained. You give me $1 billion, he says, I don't need it. Because I have, what do you want wealth for? Happiness. I have it. They don't need anything. Truly enlightened. Not those the world considers. There's a big difference. Yet, I am acting. So I told you the only way you can understand why an enlightened soul acts is purely selfless, for the sake of others. If you are enjoying so much bliss and others are full of sorrow, what will you do? If you have an ounce of feeling, that's the only way you understand it. In fact, he says it later in the Gita, out of mere compassion, I act in this world. Tesham eva anukampa. Anukampa is mere compassion. Yet I am acting. I don't need to act, I'm acting. You need to act, you're not acting. So this is personal appeal. I'm doing it, why don't you? But he declares unconsciously what he is experiencing, that supreme bliss of enlightenment. Clear? So, fourth is a personal appeal. So, what did we do so far? Devotion, persuasion, vanity, ego, vanity, you appeal to that person's, then you give a personal appeal. I am doing it. I have been functioning like that. Why don't you? And all these benign appeals don't work, then you go to the fear. And finally, fear also doesn't work, then you threaten. That's what he does, all those also. So he gives the full treatment to Arjuna. 23 is fear.
Yadihyaham navatteyam jato karmanyatandritaha mama vatmanuvartante manushya partha sarvashah.
If indeed I do not ever engage in action, unwearied men would in every way follow my path, O Partha. So he talks about, if I don't act, people will stop acting, continuing from the leadership, the vanity appeal, 2 verses ago. So here he plants fear. If I don't act, Krishna was a great leader of those days. People will stop acting. So he plants this concept of fear. What will happen to this world if, like what you are saying, everybody stops acting? So it's just catering to that emotion that, look, I need to act. And in the 24th verse, he steps it up with a threat. Now, what you must understand is, today, the way the world follows leaders and all is not positive, it's negative. It's a herd instinct. So, one person does something, others follow without thinking. So, you got to use your reasoning. It's not the main concept here. I'm saying it on the side. Don't blindly follow. So fashion, what is fashion? 2, 3 actors these fellows get, the designers, to wear it. And whole lot follows. No thinking at all. So that capacity to stand back and think, what do I need? The village preacher, he says that, the beautiful poem Oliver Goldsmith. Unpracticed he to fawn or seek for power, by doctrines fashioned to the varying hour. See, everybody is fashioned by doctrines, these, what do you call it? Fads in the modern language, by the varying hour. Every hour they change. And your whole life you go along with that. So they cater to that weakness of a herd instinct. This is marketing. One aspect of marketing is free, that everybody succumbs to. Buy one, discount, free. Everybody wants to grab. Second aspect of marketing is make them follow a herd instinct. So first one fellow wore Nike, whole lot Nike. Now Nike out of fashion, which one? Hoka. Oh, first there is Hoka shoes you must. Hoka? The new fad. Whole lot. And then tomorrow they'll be on, right? On. What you don't know? Huh? Ask your children, kids, they'll tell you. You're all too old. So, fashion you don't know, philosophy you don't know, nothing. What do you know? So, herd instinct. So, a spiritual person or a human being, forget spiritual, you don't just do what others are doing, you question what is your purpose. So, whole life is just herd instinct. How many people I ask them, okay, you got married, I don't want to know why or what. How many children you have? Two. I said, why two? You want a child, right? One child is enough. You fulfill the desire. Why two? Recently, one fellow told me, he's saying between my first and second, 14-year difference. I said, how come? Because we were satisfied with one, but pressure. He said, 14 years you resisted, 15th year, what happened? How much pressure everybody? They'll be alone. I said, 8 billion people destroying this world, overpopulated world, your child will be alone. There's no head or tail. Two. There should be two. What was it? Two. Why not 10? I'll say then. There's no thinking at all. Everything is herd instinct. But Arjuna has that weakness, so he plants that fear. Everybody will stop acting. And then finally steps it up as a threat.
Utsideyurime lokaha nakuryam karma chedaham sankarasya cha kartasyam upahanyami mah prajaha.
These worlds would perish if I did not perform action. I should be the cause of confusion of castes and destroy these people. Now, you have to relate this threat to the first chapter. So, Krishna notices a reaction to Arjuna with the concept of fear, so he steps it up to a threat. Now, Arjuna said, confusion of caste. Now, you got to understand what that means. Caste here refers to your duty, your action in the world. And those days they understood, after that it was a complete disaster. It became birth based. Your caste is not based on your birth, which has literally destroyed India because of the division and problems it's created. Even today, it is a mental classification based on your nature. So it's like saying a person who has an accounting nature should do accounting. He should not mix his duty. How can an accounting person take to music? It will be a disaster for society. How can a person with a tendency for a machinist take up a violin? Right? It's like that. It will be pandemonium. That's what he says. Confusion of caste will destroy the world. If I don't act, people will stop acting. Because Arjuna said in the first chapter, if I fight this war, I'll destroy people and the whole thing will get confused and society will be destroyed. Here he's saying, by not acting, you will do that. So he's threatening Arjuna based on his understanding on what Arjuna reacts to. So in a summer, you can't threaten a person, I'll take away your coat. You'll threaten only in winter, no? It's like that. So threat should be based on what the person reacts to. Arjuna had this problem in the first chapter. He went on harping on this. You read it, those of you who missed it. If I fight this war, there'll be destruction of society, there'll be confusion of caste, this will happen, that will happen. Therefore I don't want to fight. Here he's saying, if you don't fight, this will happen. So Arjuna has now reacted and is fully ready to understand what he needs to do next. So 25 to 35, he starts with the technique of right action, which is the essence of this chapter. Yes, Saurabh.
Yeah, so just wondering, in this verse, as Krishna mentioned, I did not perform action. Instead of you did not perform the action, because as he mentioned, or Krishna mentioned, that he don't have to act. So I'm just wondering, why he didn't appeal like Arjuna.
He is continuing from the 23rd verse, right? If I don't engage in action, being a leader, others will stop acting. And if others stop acting, the world will perish. If you don't act, the world will be gone and there'll be confusion. That's all he's saying. So Arjuna reacted to that point of confusion of caste in chapter 1. So he's using threat based on that. That's all. So the principle in these verses which we've done today is to understand that both head and heart should go together. So you must, even in your spiritual growth, how many times I've repeated, you must feel what you understand. You must understand what you feel. If the head and the heart are divergent, you cannot grow. Both have to be congruent. Your feeling must follow your intellectual conviction. And whatever positive feelings you have, they should be understood by you. So feeling without thinking is blind faith, superstition. Thinking without feeling is, you become a scholar, a professor. You don't live it. Both are useless. So now Arjuna is fully available to take in the actual essence of Karma Yoga, which is the technique of right action, 25 through 35. So everybody clear so far? Chitra?
Gautamji, you just said thinking without feeling and feeling without thinking. So the thinking without feeling, I thought that there needed to be some kind of detachment to emotion in Sthitta Prajna. Like you should not be feeling anything. Please correct me here, but what am I missing here?
No, it's completely wrong concept. How can you not feel anything? Detachment is when you feel for the higher, you are detached from the lower. If you feel for all humanity, you don't only feel for your family. You're detached from that particularization, personalization. So you feel for everybody. You don't have a hatred for people who don't share your views. That is personalization. You have to be feeling. Otherwise, how can you be detached? It's not possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Gautamji, you said the mind is driven by desires, vasanas, likes, dislikes. What is the intellect driven by? That's also vasanas, but it's a different type of vasanas.
The mind is driven by feelings, desires, likes and dislikes. What is the intellect driven by? Reason and logic, understanding. It's separate from a feeling.
Which is still our vasanas.
It's still vasana. Yes. Intellect, vasana means your entire nature, which is your intellect, mind and body. All are result of vasana. Intellect is a thought, right? Thought comes from vasanas. So the mind is just feeling. I feel like doing this. So animals have only a mind. So I told you, a moth feels like going towards the fire. It's just a feeling. It doesn't understand if it goes there, it will burn and die. It dies. So intellect is your capacity to think and understand. A human will not go to the fire because they understand. It will burn them. Animal can't. So the whole crux of your spiritual growth is the application of the intellect. Feelings are all personal. I like it, therefore I'm feeling it. Right? So that's what I was explaining to Chitra. Once your intellect understands the higher, your feelings themselves purify. They go towards that intellectual understanding. The self is everywhere, all pervading. Your feelings will start feeling that. Everybody you'll identify with as nothing but yourself. You got it? Ashish.
Hariam Gautamji. So the question is on emotions. It seems like there are times when you get into the emotional roller coaster, and depending on a given situation. But then how do you stop and come out of that emotional roller coaster?
See, the emotions go up and down because the intellect is not able to keep them under control. So you have to build your intellect. That's the only way to do this, because to the extent you're weak, the emotions take over. So when a pleasant situation comes, you're jumping. Unpleasant comes, you're sinking. You don't have the intellect to understand both are just passing, and you keep both the emotions under control.
Okay,
so you have to work to build your intellect. That's why I tell you got to get up in the morning and work on building the intellect. Study Vedanta. That's how you build it.
I know we're out of time, but I have a follow-up question to that. So I'll probably ask next time.
Yeah. You're welcome to ask. You can send it for the Wednesday Q&A as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So we will see you on Wednesday, otherwise next weekend. Hari Om.